Okay, so I think lots of people are in now. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our yarn Walking Together for Raising Peace this weekend. My name's Mich-Elle Aleksandrovics Lovegrove. I'm facilitating this evening. I'd like to start our yarn today by acknowledging the traditional owners of all of the lands that we're on today. And I give my respects to our elders and our ancestors, past and present, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today, either on the panel or who are viewing and participating in that way, and also all elders from all cultures and everyone who's watching from different lands. Now, we've got some pretty deadly people on our panel today. I'm going to do a quick little whip around to introduce everybody, and then everyone will be able to have a bit of a longer discussion about who they are, what they do, and why they're here. So first is you will see Nicole Laupepe. Welcome, Nicole. Thank you. Nicole's an experienced community advocate for social justice and cultural diversity, and she's a senior leader for Youth Off the Streets, which I'm sure she's going to talk a bit more about today, and a whole lot more. Jacqui Parker is a facilitator and trainer. She's a mediator for the Conflict Resolution Network and also works with Youth Off the Streets and a lot more as well. Michael West is an artist, a long-time member of the Land Rights Network in New South Wales, and Michael's committed to culturally respectful engagement as vital for all of us in this country to truly move forward. Paul Wright. Paul's had nearly 2 decades experience working in government and non-government sectors, and he's the National Director for Australians for Native Title and Reconciliation, known as ANTaR. Remo Giuffrre. Remo's a creative strategist and an author. He co-founded the General Thinking Network in 2001. He's associated with TEDx internationally, and he's the CEO and the founding licensee for TEDx Sydney. And Mich-Elle Myers. Michelle's the National Women's Officer for the Maritime Union of Australia. She's the Vice President of the ALP and is a big supporter of the Euler Statement from the Heart. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here and giving up your time on a Saturday evening. If I go to Nicole first, Nicole, could you, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your work and who you are?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mich-Elle. Thank you again for extending the invitation for me to speak this evening. I feel quite privileged. So I'm a Gomeroi woman from northwest New South Wales, so I'd also like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians on the lands of where we all meet today, and pay respects to elders past and present. I guess for me, I currently work for Youth Off the Streets as the Director of Cultural Services, but I'm also one of the chairs for the Euler Statement from the Heart Working Group for the Sydney Alliance. I guess a couple of years ago, why I wanted to actually participate in this panel, in this particular discussion that was so close to my heart, was a couple of years ago, I suppose I looked at my own children. I'm married into the migrant community, and as I watched my own children grow, being both First Nation and from a cold background, I watched the struggles in which they were faced on a day-to-day living in this country. Depending on where they stood and where they were was who and what people called them. And I watched them spiral through that. And I watched a nation not being able to, I suppose, embrace them for all of who they were. So a couple of years ago, I decided as an Aboriginal woman that I was going to be a vessel that was going to unite this nation and weave an ancient identity, the identity of my own people with the new and modern identity of Australia. So I decided I would go and work in multicultural Australia. And I guess for me, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, because working within the cold communities, what I found, what was so profound, was the need and the wanting of the migrant community wanting to walk and know Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. For so many of them, I was the first Aboriginal person that they had never met. But what I guess I found along my journey was that we were almost like the medicine bottle, that we had become the healing tool for so many migrant people that wanting to live in this nation. Along with my dear friend Jacqui Parker, who was also on this panel, we would embrace, people who had been here for generations, and yet some who had arrived only 2 days before. But no matter the journey, what was important for them and what was so profound is that they needed and they wanted to be told by the First Nation Australians that you were welcome. Often I would hear amongst the refugee and the asylum seeker community, when do I stop being a refugee? And for me, well, that was really simple. The moment your feet touched Aboriginal lands, you are home. So I guess for me, this was really quite close to my heart, and I guess through the work that we continue to do around the working group at the Sydney Alliance, around the Uluru Statement from the Heart, we have pretty much just driven that invitation from the First Nation people into multicultural Australia. Again, overwhelmed, taking a message from the First Nation people that was for the First Nation people, and yet on that journey, we truly did discover the heart of the nation. Working out of, these workshops and conversations, and what we found was, people from the migrant community saying, I feel healed. I guess it's probably been one of the greatest privileges of my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. And great opportunity to segue to Jacqui, because I know you and Nicole have done a lot of work together. So if you could just have a bit of a yarn about who you are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And it's absolutely fantastic to be here. And yes, Nicole is a very, very dear friend and a colleague. And we like to think that we create magic together at the best of times. Look, for me, this is, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Budawong people down in the South Coast. And this land has never been ceded. And I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. For me, this is the concept of walking together is so important. I'm a daughter of Holocaust survivors from Germany, and I've always felt very much a discomfort myself around being in a country where there has been so little recognition of what has happened in the past, and that we are on unceded land, and the travesties that occurred, and whatever has been is quite tokenistic. Now, that's probably as negative as you'll ever hear me, but really the way I feel about it is that I know what healing can occur once we get this right. Once we really can take it to the country to really understand what conciliation is really about, and that hasn't happened yet. The Uluru Statement from the Heart is such a powerful tool for me. I'm an educator, I have been for years, and it is the most beautiful instructional piece of what to do, how to walk together. And so I know, for instance, in Germany, when you go back there and you experience how people know that they have to acknowledge what their ancestors, their parents, grandparents, and so on, what occurred for them to heal. This hasn't happened here, and now is the time for it to happen. So, of course, I want to be of service to my Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, community friends, of course. But for me, this is about making sure that the legacy, my family, my children, my grandchildren can experience what true conciliation is about, and to move forward with that. So working with multicultural Australia, watching and seeing how so many communities that are coming to Australia are coming from a dispossessed land themselves into one that still is dispossessed. And this now has to change, and I do believe now is the time. So yeah, it's walking together is what it's about.
Thanks, Jacqui. Very powerful. Thank you. Michael West.
I was going to say, Pujari Gamarua is g'day in the Gadigal language. Gadigal is where I was born, in the city there. And I'd also like to acknowledge the land that I'm on. I'm on the land of the Bidjigal, which is the River Flat Clan over here towards Bankstown. And probably you hear Greenacre and Bankstown a lot on the news these days, usually at 11 o'clock. We need a sense of humour in the days that we are. We're going through major health issues globally. And I think if we can, when we work together and walk together, we can achieve great things. And I'd also like to say, Yama Gomeroi Naya Māori. I'm a Gomeroi man of the Gomeroi Nation. And and I think is all Diribu, which is deadly in my language. So I'm a member of the Land Council. I've been a member for a fair while. I'm a cultural representative with the Land Council. I'm also, my background is I have my own little consultancy. It's about reconciliation, about people working together, because I think it makes good social sense and it makes good economic sense that we all work together for better outcomes for all of us. And I believe in bringing everyone around and working together in a circle. And I think we can achieve great things when we do all work and walk together. We have one of the things we're doing at the Land Council, with my Land Council hat on, is about looking at all organisations with reconciliation action plans and seeing who they are on our land, Metro's land, and seeing who they are, what they do. And we're going to be reaching out to them to get them to work with us, to invite them to work with us, not get them, invite them to work with us on the different projects that we have. It's because we're going to eventually setting it up so we will have, obviously with RAPs, you do report to RA, Reconciliation Australia, and we will include a letter from the Land Council how you were working with us. And it's so important being the cultural authority. A bit of my background, I've also been on, I believe, in education. I guess when I went to school, I won't tell you when that was. I was told Captain Cook discovered Australia, and I thought that was pretty weird, considering Aboriginal people have been here for 65,000 years. I have been on the panel for several years before for ANTaR, which is Australian Curriculum Assessment Reporting Authority, and they work with the curriculum overall across Australia. And I've been a director on the New South Wales Indigenous Chamber of Commerce for about 6 or 7 years before. And I believe in working with white fellas, yellow fellas, black fellas, all working together, and that's not gender specific. I've seen discrimination when I've grown up, whether it's, I remember my mother being discriminated against and being treated differently, so I guess I'm jack of things not being right might be the Australian colloquialism that I believe in, and I think we can be smarter and that. And I think being an artist and working with kids in school that I have, I'm quite encouraged by the young people that are coming through who are very social responsible, whether it's Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people, whether it's LGBTIQA or whether women's rights. But I think there's just human rights, really, isn't it? About human rights and treating everyone equal and fair. So that's a bit about me. And I think art is a great way of engaging people and having a yarn and breaking down barriers. And you can see a bit of artwork behind me of mine. So, and I'll say there's a great guy there also, Remo, who's building a relationship. I've known him for 10 years. I've been part of TEDx for 10 years, and the Land Council is building a strong relationship with TEDx Sydney, obviously being conducted on Metro lands. And last time it was, we had it face-to-face. We introduced a yarning place, a circle. Unfortunately now where we are, but when it goes back, I'm sure that's going to be enacted and it'll be great. Sitting down, having a yarn.
Thank you, Michael. Michael, actually, he is a very talented artist, and I don't know if anyone watching has seen any of the, he makes message sticks and he burns them, you know, so he burns the wood and burns messages into the wood, and has made quite a few over a number of years that that he gives to people. So I'm still waiting for mine, Michael. But anyway, just a little QT Christmas present there.
Is it?
So you mentioned Remo. So what better excuse to go to Remo next? Remo Giuffrre, if you could just have a bit of a yarn about yourself, please.
Oh, thanks, Mich-Elle. Remo Giuffrre here. Normally I live in Bondi, although in lockdown I've been here on the Hawkesbury River. So this is the land of the Durug people, and I just want to start off by acknowledging them, paying my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Flattered and thrilled to be here. Thanks to Michael, who I, as he said, met 10 or 11 years ago when he did our first Welcome to Country, and gave me that message stick, and I've still got it on my bookshelf at home, Michael, and I trot it out at every TEDx event. But yeah, so I'm a serial entrepreneur, and about 10 or 12 years ago, I was approached by the TED organization to be their safe pair of hands in Sydney, because I'd known them for many years through a retail store called the Remo's General Store that I had in Sydney in the late 80s and early 90s. And that's how I came to know the TED folk. It's been an incredibly exciting journey to create that platform. And it is a platform. It's a platform to tell stories and propagate creativity and innovation from this part of the world, push it out to the rest of the world. But my background is Italian. My father immigrated to Australia in the 20s. Actually, he's long dead now, but my father was a leader in the multicultural community, founded Coazit, which is the government-funded organization that helps assimilate Italian migrants into the community. So I kind of grew up as a WOG and a marginalized person, and I understand what it is like not to be sort of in the mainstream, in the majority. I also strongly believe that we have an amazing opportunity in Australia to coalesce this, our ancient culture with the newest culture, and I think we've just done a terrible job of it to date. And I'm very keen to do all I can to help with the reconciliation process. And I became fascinated by the Uluru Statement of the Heart. In fact, I've got a new blog, which is one of my COVID projects, which I started a couple of months ago. And because of this panel, I made this week's post like an informational post about the Uluru Statement from the Heart for my tiny mailing list. I've just posted that in the chat channel if anyone wants to have a look at it. And I checked it all out with Thomas yesterday, made sure I had the right high resolution version of the statement and so forth. So that's me. I'm honored to be here and very keen to see this process continue, as I strongly believe that really we cannot self-actualize as a nation until we have reconciled and truth told and all of that good stuff that the Uluru Statement prescribes. I really strongly believe that we're not going to get there until we've done that. You're muted, Mich-Elle.
Just unmuting myself. Yeah, just tech people. Someone is muting or unmuting me as I'm about to do it. So Fergus, just to let you know, I'm happy to handle that myself. That's okay. I don't know who's doing it, but yeah. So Mich-Elle, Could you give us a bit of a yarn about yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's a great honour to be here, actually. I've got to say, my name is Mich-Elle Myers. I'm a National Officer of the Maritime Union of Australia. I am coming to you from Gadigal land in Sydney. I'm a very good mate of Thomas Mayers, probably is my best claim to fame. Thomas and I were both wharfies back in 2000. After the Patrick's dispute, we were negotiating an EBA against Chris Corrigan. And that's when I first met Thomas from Darwin. I was a wharfie in Sydney, he was in Darwin. And he is a very good mate of mine. But I guess my union, I think Michael actually just said my life motto a minute ago, which is jack of things not being right. I think that is my life motto, and it's probably where our union comes from in the places that they go and seek to campaign for social justice issues. You know, it's in that spirit. Our union, the Maritime Union, has always been right up there campaigning with alongside First Nations people, right back to the days of the Wave Hill Walk-Off and many other campaigns in over the years. Sorry. Now, our involvement, I guess, lately has been with the Uluru Statement from the Heart. I don't think I was paying attention or I was listening until I read the Uluru Statement or I heard it read to me. You know, it is an invitation. It's a most special document, but there is the line in the statement that says in 1967, we'll count it. In 2017, we seek to be heard. Seek to be heard was the moment that I realized that I wasn't listening and I hadn't listened and I hadn't actually tried to sit down and listen to what First Nations people were asking for, campaigning for, fighting for all of these years. This is personally, not my union, but and I guess those lines were really profound for me, and that was the trigger for me that I would continue to help Thomas and go on his journey to campaign for the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Professor Megan Davis, Arnie Pat Anderson, and Noel Pearson came and saw our union leadership, and from that, I guess, grew Thomas's journey, where he went around and campaigned for the Uluru Statement. I am the Vice President of the Labor Party, the Federal Vice President. We have committed to the Uluru Statement in full. We will not see any real change, in my opinion, until there is a legislative voice to Parliament in the Constitution. You know, we can't, anything less than that is just not going to work. I just don't believe it's going to work. But, you know, we are fully committed to that. And I guess that's probably enough about me for now. I'm happy to answer any questions, but yeah, thanks, Michael. I think you just encapsulated my whole life's journey in one little sentence. Jack of things not being right. Dead right there, brother.
Thank you, Mich-Elle. Paul Wright, if you could just tell us a bit about yourself, please, and about ANTaR's work.
No worries. Thanks, Mich-Elle. Thanks for having us tonight, and nice to be on the panel with these lovely people. And it's nice to have just heard a little bit about the stories of each, which just adds to the pressure, because obviously I'm amongst very good company. So yeah, a little bit about me. I was born on Ngunnawal Ngarringeri country. We call it Canberra these days. So I'm a Canberra boy, but also grew up on Gomeroi country. And when lockdown allows, I usually work on Gadigal country. But these days I work where I live, which is on Darug land out in the northwest of Sydney. So I don't mind working from home. I've got black cockatoos flying in and out of my backyard and blue tongue lizards crawling around. So it's nice little lunchtime escapes out in the northwest of Sydney on Darug land. So I'd like to pay my respects to the Darug people. I'm a white fella, and just Remo just talking about his roots. I just thought I'd share just a little story about my ancestors. So it's mostly Irish with a little bit of Yorkshire English in my background. And some of my scallywag Irish forebears were so keen to get here that a bunch of brothers burnt down the local mayor's haystack, the English mayor's haystack in, I think it was County Monaghan in the centre of Ireland in the 1850s. And then they stood by the burning haystack with their arms out, waiting for their ticket to Van Diemen's Land. So they ended up in Tasmania. So that's where some of my forebears come from. So we were desperate to get to this continent, the Great South Land, which we call Australia. And so it's been a real honour and privilege to grow up here. I had, I guess, unusually for a white kid, middle-class white kid, fairly standard upbringing, but my dad worked in Aboriginal affairs for years, the Aboriginal Development Commission and ATSIC, the whole time ATSIC was around, and then Indigenous Business Australia. And so I guess subliminally or by osmosis, I was taking in the issues from a very early age, and Dad's colleagues and bosses were all black fellas, and we would be there for barbecues. So I had a different, not a typical, I guess, relationship with First Nations peoples in Australia growing up. Did university and the like, and worked in the public service in Canberra. But when we came to Sydney, my wife came up here for medical school, and I joined her, and I was working in immigration for years, and it was just as the Abbott government came to power, and I thought this is a good opportunity to get out of the public service and get out of immigration. And I looked for opportunities to work, to serve, I guess, in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander space because of this deep impression that had been put on me as a child, watching Dad work and meeting First Nations peoples, particularly on Gomeroi land up in the north of New South Wales. And through a set of circumstances, eventually I ended up running the Close the Gap campaign out of the Human Rights Commission. And then from there came to run ANTaR about 3.5 years ago. And just if anyone hasn't heard of ANTaR, I think Mich-Elle read out we're kind of the artist formerly known as. We don't really go by our old original title. We go by ANTaR these days. But it was originally Australians for Native Title and Reconciliation. And just thinking about the theme of tonight's discussion and chat and yarn, walking together, well, the whole raison d'etre for ANTaR is walking together. It was black fellas, white fellas, non-indigenous Australians coming together basically in outrage at the Howard government's watering down of the native title legislation based on the High Court's decision in the late 90s. So yeah, for the last 25 years, ANTaR has existed to support and represent the coming together of all communities to fight for justice, rights and respect. We're a foundational member of the Closing the Gap or Close the Gap campaign and the Change the Record campaign. So these are all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander led social justice campaigns, and often world first. I think Closing the Gap as a campaign was as a human rights-based campaign that was Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander led, instigated by Professor Tom Calma, the Human Rights Commissioner at the time. These are world first Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander led social justice campaigns. And it's been a real, I guess, honour and privilege for an organisation like ANTaR, which is there to exemplify walking together, to be a part of those stories and those that important advocacy for the last 25 years. So I noticed on the chat tonight or on the Zoom, there's a number of our ANTaR family have joined in to watch. So just a little shout out to them. And yeah, I think that's it for me, Mich-Elle.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. That's deadly. So, you know, we are talking about walking together, and, you know, there's a lot more to that. You know, walking together is a very multi-layered and complex thing. So I'm just wondering if any of you would like to sort of start off with, what does walking together mean, and who is walking together? And, you know, under whose direction do we walk together as well? Because if we're walking together for First Nations people, I would assume as a Ngarringeri woman that we would be listening to First Nations people to help direct that walk. So would anyone like to sort of start on if we actually determine what it is we're talking about with walking together? Anyone got anything to say? What we mean by walking together? What do we mean?
Jacqui, if you want to speak first.
No, you go, Michael. No, sorry, you go, Michael.
What I was going to say is that to me, walking together is about, I guess, acknowledging the past, both the good and the bad, or not so good, one might say, and to learn from that and to be respectful, treat people with dignity, to see, I guess, the positive, but also understand not so positive things. And everyone has a right to fulfill their dreams and aspirations. I think if we're going to be an intelligent country, and if we're going to be an intelligent and a prosperous country, then we need to have in place opportunities for everyone, and not to marginalise people or communities or families.
Jacqui, you wanted to say something before?
Yeah, I mean, it's, as soon as I hear that, I can't keep my mouth shut, as Nicole will verify. But it's about walking together is really, it's about accepting the invitation, and it's having confidence in doing so. I know Summer May Finlay, I've used her a lot in the workshops that we do, because she puts it so simply and clearly, and she just, it's also instructional, like the Uluru Statement, in that it specifies exactly what it takes. It's not about tokenistic behaviours that make one feel good. It's not about even anymore about being an ally, but it's truly about being an accomplice. And it's about sort of moving into that place where it's considering, what does it really mean to accept that invitation? For me, it's, I don't want to lead change. That's that's not my thing. I think I've done that in all sorts of different ways in my own, with my family or whatever, but it's really about just being part of the change. And I mean, as Gough would have said, now's the time that things have got to change, and it's about paying respect to what has happened, acknowledging what has happened. It's about ensuring that people are aware. Those around us are aware of what it is and what are the practical solutions and why it has to happen, and helping educate others, standing up even if it's uncomfortable. It's doing what one's gut feeling is telling you to do, and just not hesitating in that process. It's about making this space and this country a better place for those that are coming now, those that are moving forward. Knowing that the importance of Indigenous people defining the issue and the required action, and deeply, deeply listening and walking with.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Jacqui. Especially the deeply listening. We had a panel just before this one where it was yarning with Mother Earth, which was just amazing. And one of the things that sort of came out across all of us across that panel was the need to listen. The need to be silent and to sit. And we were talking about sort of finding that bond with Mother Earth, etc. Do you think we listen to each other well enough? And by that, I'm talking about First Nations people, non-Indigenous people, etc. In my just overview experience over time, I have actually found that a lot of times there will be very well-meaning non-Indigenous people, good hearts, in the right place, and they don't want to listen to you because they've got their own set thing. It's like, no, this is how we do it. This is how we want to do it. I'm coming here to help you, sort of thing. And that is a constant over years. So how can we listen better? And how can I, as a First Nations woman, listen better to a non-Indigenous person who wants to be an accomplice?
I'm just going to, I'll shut up after this, but I'm just going
right.
to, your question was, do we listen to each other? That, you asked that question.
Yeah.
You know what, we know we don't listen to each other because the problem is still there. So it's like, you know, I mean, it's like when you're having a fight with a partner, argument, you know, with your kids, teenagers, whatever. While that's going on, the listening is not happening. There are blocks, you know, that are blocking the empathy from occurring. So we know that they have to be dismantled, that those blocks have to be dismantled so listening can take place. And, you know, I think we keep it really simple. How do we listen? You know, just go with some simple instruction. The Uluru Statement from the Heart is a gift to non-Indigenous Australia. You tell it to a cold community, they get it immediately because it's in their DNA. It's just the rest of the population we need to keep educating. And thank you for the Uluru Statement because it tells us what to do. You know, it tells us how do we listen? What do we do with what we hear?
Mich-Elle, I'm saying, do you want to talk a little bit more about the Uluru Statement? Because I know you're so deeply involved with that.
I guess something that you just said a minute ago is like, how can, you know, what can we do to help, you know, non-Indigenous people hear or, you know, hear what we're asking for? I mean, be available for us to ask stupid questions. You know, like there are so many people that want to help, but I guess afraid of the language they might use or being culturally insensitive or saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. I mean, I'm notorious for putting my foot in my mouth, but my good friend Thomas has answered some really stupid questions that I've asked over the time. But I think that is a really important piece in the link between non-Indigenous Australians and that want to be allies, but, you know, are scared they're going to stuff it up. Or do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing. I mean, yeah, you're right, Jacqui, you're absolutely right. The instructions are all there. You know, it's in the Uluru Statement. It's the most powerful thing we will ever read in our lifetime. And it's all there. So we just need to hear that and listen to that. But I guess for mine, I'm asking First Nations people to help us get it right. You know, help us use our language and our words in the right way, and do the right things. And I guess the other thing that I just wanted to say was mentioned earlier by Michael as well about the reconciliation action plans. You know, those sometimes small plans are really significant in actually just helping people understand a lot more. You know, we have one with the Australian Labor Party. I co-chair our working group for the RAP with Senator Pat Dodson now. It was Chris Burke until a couple of weeks ago. So we chair our RAP and we're about to go to a stretch RAP. But I think doing those as well as an organisation or at your business or at your workplace helps you understand the broader reach and the small or the large things that you really can be doing that can help.
I've just seen something lovely here. It's Kirsten has just said, Kirsten Anker said, we also need to be thoughtful and informed so that if we do ask a stupid question, at least we know it's stupid. No, look, good point. I mean, it goes all the way, I think, doesn't it? Can I just throw this out, and not seeking to sort of derail this at all from Uluru Statement or any of this, and we're talking about this being a beautiful, beautiful map. Where does that sit then with what I actually think is the most amazing and incredible map, which is the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? Like, for me, that's an overarching thing that supports, and Uluru Statement supports that. Have any of you got any thoughts on how they work together, or how we can seek to walk together using both of those? Because that's a gift too, that declaration. Any thoughts? Paul, I mean, you're in this realm. I know you work in this realm a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, Mich-Elle. Well, look, yes, I agree. It's very important. It obviously predates Uluru, and from a human rights perspective, it took our government, I think the Australian government was one of 3 or 4 recalcitrant countries to not sign the declaration when it was formed. I think we were in the group of shame with, I think, New Zealand, the US and Canada. And I think eventually we did in 2009 sign up. We signed up to the obligations, but of course, even just a cursory look at the obligations in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, we're not living up to our obligations as a nation. So sadly, since 2017, with the Uluru Statement, just to make that connection, we're consistent in how we don't live up to our obligations. Of course, Uluru came out of a referendum council process instigated by the federal government. It was about the 5th federal government process to come up with a way forward to sort of map out constitutional reform in a way that would be palatable for parliamentarians rather than First Nations peoples and their non-Indigenous friends and family in the community. And the reason why they rejected it outright was purely political. I think without, and sorry, I'm probably bouncing more back onto the Uluru Statement, but it would go for the UN Declaration, Mich-Elle. I think within a few months of Uluru being offered up by the delegates in May 2017, some of the early polling, I think the figure I have in my head was about 60% of Australians. And by this stage, I think Barnaby Joyce had already opened up his mouth and said this was going to be a third chamber. And the Prime Minister at the time, we were rolling through Prime Ministers pretty quickly during that time, but it was Malcolm Turnbull who rejected it. But even despite that initial kind of political rejection straight away, 60% of Australians supported the statement. And that was without really understanding or engaging with the detail. It's a very simple statement, but I think, and this goes to your first question, Mich-Elle, about walking together and listening to each other, how we listen. I actually think the efforts of First Nations peoples, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples for decades, along with the many of us that are allies and friends and family, this push for truth-telling, which has been happening before formal processes, is actually working because the vast majority of Australians actually support this stuff, even without actually understanding the technical detail about what it means. So I took great encouragement from statistics or polling like that, and it's only improved since. Most Australians are on board. They get it instinctively rather than necessarily having the background of the politics and the policies, understanding the intergenerational trauma, understanding, all that's gone on. I mean, for decades, since Federation and before that, we've denied our history, haven't we, as a nation? We've actively tried to not talk about what happened. But, the myth of the fair go, well, I think that some of these things are starting to actually influence our thinking. So I might not have quite answered your question about UN declaration, but there's consistency there. And I know that the statement was based on a human rights approach and is very consistent with that declaration.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. What are your thoughts, Nicole, on, Uluru Statement, UN Declaration? And they do support each other. But I do think that, some of those, what is blithely called aspirational goals in the declaration can actually come to life through Uluru.
Oh, look, absolutely. Obviously, I support the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Along with Jacqui and the Sydney Alliance, we've created a working group that have driven that knowledge right across Sydney, right across New South Wales. I think for me, it was really important that, part of that is finding the heart of our nation. And for me, when we talk about walking with, I wanted to drive that through Multicultural Australia. I wanted to give every Australian an opportunity to walk with each other. And for me, often when we talk about reconciliation, people will say, what they can do for Aboriginal people. But I sit in that and I go, well, any relationship should be two ways. And it's just as important for me to know you and know your community. And together, when we learn and discover each other through respect, we can elevate each other's voice and causes. And I just want to thank Multicultural Australia because they have been right behind the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And it's been my privilege working in that space. But I guess for me, of late, I'm an Aboriginal woman who's part of the emergency response for the COVID crisis that sits within the Aboriginal community. And I think when we talk about human rights, I walk through these streets every day and I cry at night. And I think, when will it happen? When will we be able to be given the same rights, the same elements of humanity to be able to flourish like every other Australian? I know I said it earlier, but my heart breaks as a mother. And I guess my grandmother thought her mother would see the day that the scales would tip. And then my mother thought that of me. And I hope that I get to see that in my lifetime. And I believe that the Uluru Statement from the Heart right now is in reach to give any form of human rights to our people, because I am tired of seeing our people, in particular our children, not be given an opportunity to flourish. So I think we haven't embraced human rights as a nation. I think we continue to deny First Nation Australians, and I think it's goddamn time that the Constitution recognises the first sovereign people of these nations.
Yep, that's certainly a big one, isn't it? It's certainly a big one. And look, I agree, Nicole. And I just quietly, I'm tired too. You know, I work in the land rights area. I'm a member of a local Aboriginal land council. COVID, you know, people say, oh, how's your day? And I go, it's COVID. It's COVID from the moment I wake up. It's COVID until I go to sleep. And sometimes I can't sleep because of COVID, because, you know, it's not, it's about those basic things, and not wanting to make this about COVID, because it's not. But it's just like, when you have to, you know, you're on the phone, I'm ringing, you know, local Aboriginal land councils in Brewarrina and Wilmaringal and Gonia and my friends in Wilcannia, like, what is going on? I'm seeing what media is telling us. Do you have enough to eat? What is happening? You know, what is that chaos? And I'm just speaking about one of the many people, you know, I'm not involved at a committee level. And it's just tiring to think that, you know, we talk about walking together, and then there is a public health crisis where the disparities between us are so evident and so huge, you know, that people can't even get something to eat. They can't have a safe place to isolate because of issues that have housing, overcrowding, substandard housing that have gone on for decades and decades and decades. And it's tiring. So I say, I know, you know, Paul, you work in a wonderful space. It's in a wonderful space. I'm going to talk to you now, and I'm the facilitator, and I'll just be quiet in a minute. But I am tired. I'm tired of it all. You know, I remember very much, and I don't know if any of you have seen this. There was one of the few films that was shot in the early 70s, the Aboriginal Tent Embassy in Canberra. And the then beautiful, beautiful young Auntie Isabel Coe was sitting there, and she was surrounded by these young non-Indigenous women, right, who adored her and loved her because, you know, she was a brilliant woman, brilliant mind. And they were saying, what can we do? What can she was sitting there with a cigarette, and she was, you know, very glamorous, you know, and she just sat and she was there with a cigarette. What can we do, Isabel? What can we do? How can we help you? How can we help Aboriginal people? And she just looked and she said, it's, you know, I might think it might have been 1974 or 75. We'll say it was 75. It's 1975, she said. If you don't know what you can do to help us now, I'm not about to help you. Go away and you find out. And now it's 2021. So.
Sorry, I'm just gonna butt in again, Mich-Elle, because it is the fatigue that you and Nicole are talking about that I think we all have to understand now, that this is a non-Indigenous conversation. This is, you know, this is white people's business to fix this now. And I totally understand that you know, that it's 97% of the population now have to stand up and move forward to get this fixed once and for all. So what Nicole is experiencing out in Dubbo is just no more. It doesn't happen again. And, and we have, we've been given the invitation. I'm speaking obviously to 98 people here, or speaking to the converted. So it's not about anyone on here, but it is a call out to everybody to know that it is our business. We don't need to listen to the stories anymore. I mean, I'm not saying there's not a place for truth telling, and I know, the sacred space around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, that's the sacred space often that we need to be respectful of, but that's not what we're talking about here. We all know it. We've heard it. I know those conversations. Every time Nicole and I do a workshop, I watch the faces. Tell us more, Nicole. People love to hear it, but we know it. So let's now accept the invitation and move forward. Let's together fix this. I get your fatigue.
Remo, have you got any thoughts of anything to say sort of along these lines about how we can walk together, knowing that there is one side that's pretty tired?
Well, I'm curious to know what the support level is. I know that in the research I did for my post on the statement, it indicated that it was increasing, but it was, the numbers I was looking at were from 2020. So I'm just curious to know what the COVID during this period is. Support for the Uluru Statement, has it continued to increase? On the website, there was that beautiful black fella films video, which I've just posted the link, the Vimeo link in the chat channel, and it was labeled as a secondary school resource. I'm curious, and I don't know, is the educational side of thing in full swing, or is there still resistance to that, or is that video that I've just posted being used as a resource formally within the educational system?
I was going to say that I was on ANTaR's advisory group for several years, and the curriculum actually, probably everyone knows ANTaR from NAPLAN, but don't hold that against them. ANTaR has a Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander advisory group, and they're made up of basically educators. And what happens is they look at how incorporating Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander stories and histories and culture throughout the whole curriculum. And I know prior to me leaving there, they actually had elaborations for science. So one of the great things, so when you think about each state, they draw on the national curriculum. So ANTaR sets up the national curriculum. So there is education happening, and one of the things that I thought was great was when they had an example of a little robot that was actually being programmed by school children with the help of traditional owners. And what was happening is the robot was doing tasks, but it was also speaking in language. So the school got permission from the knowledge holders and the elders about using language. So it was quite interesting when you think about it, STEM, which is so important, combining that with traditional languages, so teaching the whole school. So there's great examples like that. I think it can be done, and I know I think one of the things that was out there was a bit of hesitancy from some of the educators out there, the teachers and that, who are not quite sure how to do it the right way. But I think it's important for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to reach out, and for the teachers to reach out, and the schools to reach out to have those conversations, and that invite people in to have a yarn.
Look, I hate to use the word roadmap. I mean, we've heard a lot of roadmap usage, but what is the roadmap? And I'm ignorant about what that is. I mean, what is the next step for the statement, the Uluru Statement, and and we're all driving it, we're all trying to drive it, but is there a sort of central, is there a roadmap for it? That's my question.
I don't know what the roadmap is myself. Does anybody else know what the roadmap is? Yeah, it's interesting what we're talking, because there was the Uluru statement talk earlier today. Look, someone's just sent me a message saying that Thomas reported earlier today. Thank you very much. I think Sheila, thank you. That 57% of people would say yes, and for First Nations people, it would be 80% to Uluru.
Right.
So how do we get there? You know, I guess that's the thing.
Jill, I was just going to, unless Nicole wants to jump in from working with the statement from the heart, the working group. Nicole, you might have more strategic information to share than me, but for those that are listening in, and again, I'm sure most people are aware, but the government under Minister Ken Wyatt has been going through a process to consider a legislated voice rather than a constitutionally enshrined voice. And so that process has been going on for about the best part of 12 months, nearly 18 months now. It isn't what is asked for in the Uluru statement. I guess answering Remo's question, there is a process that's government initiated, but it's not consistent with what's been asked for. So yeah, that's just worth noting.
Okay.
Mich-Elle, can I jump in on that? When you were talking about fatigue earlier, this is exactly the kind of fatigue that this sort of thing has caused. Like, I mean, the Uluru statement already did the consultation process. Now, Minister Wyatt wants to go and do his own consultation process for the last 2 years or whatever. And now they're going to put in this legislative process that's not going to be a constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament. They're going to try and wedge the other parties. It's going to be a basket case disaster. It's just so frustrating, and that's the fatigue that I feel is that rubbish that, you know, you go and reject the statement. Thank you, Malcolm Turnbull, completely. You rejected it. And then Mr. Wyatt goes off and does his little consultation. Well, they kind of did the consultation for you at Uluru. Sorry. If you're going to listen, mate, and the rest of this government, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit cranky, but, you know, that's the whole problem, is that, you know, we're not getting anywhere because nobody wants to accept this piece as the way forward and commit to it and do it. And then, you know, it's such a mess. It needs to be non-legislated, constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament. And that's all there is to it. But they're going to try and put something in before the election to make themselves look like they're moving on. And they don't mean it. They don't mean it on anything. They're just, anyway, that's it. Shut up, Mich-Elle.
No, look, you're fine. And my question is it politics that is making the government wanting to go down that track rather than taking and utilising what has already been done by a lot of like really amazing people in the past? Why? Is it we need to have our own stamp on it? We have to be the ones that are doing it. We've got to go through this process. I'm not quite understanding why there is such a lack of acceptance for all of the work and the piece of work. That's the statement from the heart. Can anyone sort of enlighten me? I'm not understanding. I don't, you know, we don't need it to sort of become a political discussion, but sometimes I think it just has to be, doesn't it? It just has to be, you know, because that's what we've got to deal with. Is that it, Mich-Elle? Is it just politics? I
think so. You know, like what was Malcolm Turnbull's reason for rejecting the statement? You know, what did he say? What were his words? I mean, and what consultation could possibly have been done now by the Liberal Party doing theirs for the last 2 years that is different to, better than, or more comprehensive than what happened at Uluru. I just don't get it. And I think it is politics. And you said you don't want to make this a political conversation, but it is, and it always will be until we fix it. My concern now is that they are going to wedge everybody on this legislative process. And I think that's everyone's concern. I mean, you know, what do other parties do if they put up a piece of legislation that, you know, sounds kind of good or a little bit of a fix? You know, are we going to, you want the Labor Party or the Greens to vote against that? When, you know, the end goal is the constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament. But if it's not that, and there's this piece of legislation, what are they, you know, they're going to wedge us. They're going to wedge people, and that is playing politics. And that's really, really sad and pathetic, in fact.
I've just got a little question here, just from, I think it's Carmel, but I'll just deal with this before it disappears. We need to know how to contact the best person to invite to school, to have and start a yarn at school regarding the RAP, to ensure this is done in the most culturally appropriate manner. So Carmel, McCudden, you go to Reconciliation Australia. Okay, so just go to Reconciliation Australia's website. There's everything's there. Have a look. Call some people there, or Reconciliation New South Wales as well. If you, because I don't know where you are. Sorry, I shouldn't just go to New South Wales immediately, but you know, go to Reconciliation Australia, and that's where you will be able to get the assistance you need for that. Yeah, sure, Paul.
Thanks, Michelle. Really quick shout out just on that subject. There's a new campaign called the Know Your Country campaign. I actually am wearing the T-shirt. Nice little design. So a little shout out for the Know Your Country campaign. It's a new one, and it's about getting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander educational officers in every single primary school in Australia. So I think that's a worthy campaign to get behind, just on that subject. And it's part of the truth-telling process we need to go through.
So apart from Uluru's statement from the heart, if we're actually going to look at walking together, and I know, Nicole, you know, you mentioned a couple of things, and then I just went into this whole COVID rant, but, you know, there's a lot of practical things that people can do on the ground. I know there's a lot of, you know, there's non-Indigenous people who are listening today, maybe more than Aboriginal people, I'm not sure. But what can we do? You know, what are some simple things that people can do every single day, just in their small circle of influence, to be part of a walking together? Because it's got to be grassroots. So we're talking about the big documents like Uluru, etc., and all of those things that need to happen. But if the ground is not meeting the sky, you know, we need them to meet. What are some things that people can do?
Yeah, look, I think for me and for Jacqui, what I chose as an Aboriginal person to go and introduce myself, often quite through Multicultural Australia. I heard that, you know, I wanted to know the Aboriginal people, and I just didn't know how. So I made a conscious decision to go and work in the industry and go and introduce myself and my people. And what I discovered was there was a beautiful place for my people to take our rightful place as the TOs and welcome newcomers onto our lands. And I've never felt so privileged in all my life. But within that, we just sat with certain groups within community, and I listened to them. It wasn't just about me telling them about Aboriginal people. It was about an Aboriginal person listening to their stories and who they needed to be on Aboriginal lands. And when could they be an Australian citizen? You know, when do I stop being a refugee? And I wanted to be a part of the solution to that. And for me, that was really simple, like I mentioned before, the moment your feet hit our lands, and to be all of you, you know, to bring your wisdom and your knowledge and your cultural practice. And please hear our wisdom when we say don't assimilate, because what Australia needs is for you just to be you. Like what Australia needs is for my people, for us to be us. We need to be, you know, when we stand beside the person next to us, as Australian citizens, we all have an obligation to stand with our brothers and sisters next to us and ensure that we are all given an opportunity to flourish. This isn't about separating cultures. This is about having a story of unity. Division is what broke this nation. Only a story of unity is what's going to unite it and heal it. So I think what you do is that you gather like-minded people from all different cultural groups and language groups, and together start to walk and know one another. When you discover one another, out of that then becomes respect, and out of respect comes acceptance. And we all, every day of our lives, have an opportunity to do that with somebody in our circle of influence. And like Jack and I say, a few years ago, she and I met. Now I can honestly say there are hundreds of us that stand in this same circle that continue to multiply across this beautiful nation that we all call home. At the end of the day, we're all part of Australia, and why we're here tonight is to ensure that we unite and give every Australian an opportunity to flourish.
I spent 10 years of my life working for SBS, for the Special Broadcasting Service, and for NITV. So I know what you mean about that privileged position. My home was radio, but I worked, in TV sometimes, and I was sort of worked around the place a bit. And, at that time we had 67 different language groups represented by over 130 countries. This is on one floor. I used to call it the United Nations of Media. And, I just loved walking in there every day, because I got to learn about so many other cultures, and we shared food. And I'm talking over years, and you see people at their best and their worst, and they become your brothers and sisters. But I was the First Nations person, running that radio show. So people would always come to me and ask things. And it was a wonderful place to be in, to be able to share that, but also to learn about them. And I was always very interested in everybody. I mean, that's just me anyway. So I think, it is that sharing, and that's what we can all do. And anyone who's listening today, as well, we all need to be interested in each other, like really interested in each other, and share with each other, because once we find those commonalities and that heart stuff, and there will be heart stuff, then we actually start that grassroots walking together that can withstand the rigors and the storms of politics and all of that other type of bipartisanship that occurs at different levels. Anyway, that's my thought about that, just from a daily aspect. Michael, can I ask you, because I know you do a lot of work, with people and community groups, etc., on looking at helping people to understand and, be interested and share with each other. So can you talk a little bit about sort of what are some of the secrets that some of us, I guess, or some of us listening could help employ on a daily basis?
Well, I put in the links there in the chat. I put in, as you were saying, SBS. I remembered a great thing that they did where they had the Euler statement on all the different languages. I think is great. You'll find that in the chat there. So if you can, all the different community groups can have a yarn about that in their own language. But I think it's all about building relationships and having honest conversations, and about being strategic. As I said, like, honest conversations is, I saw in there, there was a comment about government and corporates. I think the corporates have a great opportunity to play their part, and with the reconciliation action plans is one of the things the Land Council's doing. And we've reached out to a lot of different organisations, and they're with their RAPs, they're working out how to work better with community. So they're grateful that we're reaching out. I've did a bit of analysis. It's 300 organisations with RAPs. We've got we're working with organisations like the Iconic. Everybody knows that. I think every female would know that. I'm not being sexist. I've only known one woman that I've known who did not know. And
I love the Iconic. I hate the Iconic.
What I got told is what happens is guys I know it too, and they buy 2 sizes because they work out which size. But I'm saying, even like, I mean, there's so many different organisations out there that are willing to listen, to come together and that to work with us. And yeah, I think the big end of town, getting them on board, and a lot of them have great passionate people out there that want to work, and they see it makes good sense to be part of the, think about it, corporate social responsibility, because the young people that are coming through are very conscious of people's rights and about the environment and that. So if you want all the bright people that are coming through, the younger generations, then you've got to really set up a good corporate social responsibility culture within your organisation.
Yeah.
It's not just ticking boxes; it's actually the cultures for those young people to come through. So it's honest conversation about being strategic in our approach, about thinking how to work better. Like one of the pilots we're looking at is about clan names on street signs. Is what we're looking at. Talking to the railways about a pilot about having clan names on train stations. Imagine that, pulling into Redfern next stop, Gadigal, or over the bridge you go Milson's Point, Camaragal. It's just a no-brainer, isn't it? And it just becomes part of the norm. And the great things, and they're learning. The government, the New South Wales government, also, I know, has been sponsoring stuff like fire stick farming and that, and teaching that. So I think recognising how the country works is so important.
Oh, there you go. Look, that actually, a few people would probably laugh about that. I'm mindful that the panel is going till 7:30, not till, generally they've been 2 hours. I just need some sort of a sign from IT that if we do go past 7:30, because we're hitting the last 10 minutes. I've noticed quite a few comments from Sabine. Sabine, hi. I do know Sabine for years, asking questions such as, how can politicians be trusted when they continue to work on dismantling the Northern Territory Aboriginal Land Rights Act, the intervention, skyrocketing incarceration, desecration and destruction of First Nations sacred sites? Look, Sabine, or if a panel member wants to comment, all very good questions. Big issues, etc. And I don't know whether we actually have the time to discuss these in this panel, because we can also sort of spread that out across this entire continent, not only the Northern Territory as well. So there's a whole number of things. I do want to say though, I am tired. I am also wanting to not continue to engage in deficit conversation, and that's not about hearing the rough stuff, but we've got to, in my opinion, we've got to focus on the empowering conversation about what we are doing about something. So I'm just saying, Sabine, like, with respect, I don't want to direct a question to the panel focusing on trusting politicians or not, because we've got to hold our own ground with this, in my opinion. So with Jacqui, Mich-Elle, Nicole, you're working very much in this realm. Do you think I'm on the right track with that? We need to be mindful of the stuff that's going on, but we've got to have empowering conversation.
Absolutely. I have to say, can I just say, non-indigenous Australia now needs to just get on with it. We've got to remove the roadblocks, whatever they are, as they come up. We've got to keep it simple for those around us. We've got to know that, First Nations must have a voice enshrined in Parliament once and for all. Like, it's just got to happen. There's no ifs or buts, because nothing else has worked. And this is the obvious thing, and we understand why, and we've just got to share that. And can I just say to to my, Indigenous First Nations brothers and sisters, just keep encouraging the rest of the population. You don't have to do the work. Just encourage people. People are nervous. They think they're going to get it wrong. So just encourage them to get up. It's okay. They're going to get it right. Doesn't matter if they make mistakes, but we've really just got to get on with it now.
Absolutely. And get on it with the First Nations people who are walking that path with you. And we all have our different parts of the path that we're on. I'm on a different path. I'm on the same path, but I'm somewhere else at the moment because I'm focused on something else, because it is so big. It is so huge, all of it. So, sort of just harking back, Sabine, to your question, is that we all have our part to play, and we must all continue to hold that line, in my opinion, with whatever it happens to be. But ultimately, we're supporting this amazingly important document that would change this continent forever, should it be taken up. We are heading to 7:30. Has anyone got anything that you would like to mention, or if we go around just for a few words from each of the panelists before we go? Sorry, Nicole, because you're directly to the left of me on my thing, so can I go with you first?
Yeah, look, I just want to thank you for all participating tonight, but I just want to remind everyone that the statement itself is written to the people of Australia. Yeah, it was written because it was written from our people to you. Yeah, and the invitation is for everybody to walk with each other. And there's power in that. There's power in the wisdom of the words that were written from the tribes, from Uluru, that gathered that day. And I just, again, like I encouraged in the last discussion, please, when you leave tonight, please take a moment and just sit in silence as you read those words, and allow those words to sit into your spirit and into your soul. And as you move forward, all I ask is that you do what the statement has asked, is that as you move around day to day, that you'll use your place of influence, that you'll use your place of privilege to continue to remove the roadblocks for others so they can come and walk with you and to be able to be given the same opportunity to flourish. This is a beautiful nation, yeah, and I hope by doing this tonight and further discussions that we will create a nation that one day we're all very proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, could I go to you next?
Final thoughts. I've got about an hour and a half's worth. A couple of really quick things. Humility, I think, is really important at this time, that whether it's a conversation with friends that may not see eye to eye or share your passion for getting this right, I think approaching them with humility, plus also just being applying humility to reaching out for the truth is really important. I think there's not enough humility in society at large. So we need to bring that back in how we deal with each other and consider each other. The pandemic is a really interesting litmus test about how we consider each other and protect each other as a whole community. So yeah, I think let's lean into a bit of humility, because it's a great way of showing our love. Again, just a little anecdote. I've been doing some landscaping at the back. I don't have many skills, so I've been getting a couple of landscapers to come and help me, as they've been allowed to, in the backyard at different lockdown points in Sydney. And invariably they'll ask you what you do for a living, and I'll say I run this organisation that works for and with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to, push for rights and reconciliation. And you can see the clogs moving over, and invariably they'll sort of express their experience or impressions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, often not very informed. But when you scratch below the surface, they, again, when you talk about the issues on a human level, they do get it. People get it. They actually do think these myths we build up about a fair go and mateship. I hate the idea of, like, the false idea of mateship in Australia, which is often a very male thing and only very surface. But when we actually start living up to these values and ideals that we state we have, yeah, we can see real positive conversations and minds change with a bit of humility. So thanks, Mich-Elle. And thanks everybody else.
Remo, have you got some final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Okay, so I think there's 100 little steps that already, I mean, for everyone on this panel and in this audience, constitutional recognition is already a no-brainer, and we can't wrap our heads around why it hasn't already happened. But I think, to Michael's point, the normalization of Indigenous, knowledge of country, street signs, the Australia Post stuff, these are all little things. The increasing visibility of Indigenous culture within the popular culture, and also the lionization of the uniqueness of this coming together, this combo platter of ancient and new, which I think makes us globally unique. I think all of these little things will eventually get us to the place where it's not just a no-brainer for us, but everyone thinks, oh, shit, what are we talking about here? It's like, this is an obvious, and hopefully this is going to be a quick thing and not a slow thing. But I just think it's all this incremental. It's like boiling the frog, and all of a sudden the frog will just be cooked.
Thank you. Interesting analogy. Thanks for that. Mich-Elle, you got some words?
I just don't know what to say after boiling the frog.
You can use that.
Yeah, awesome. No, I mean, I think Nicole said everything that needs to be said. My words don't mean as much as hers do. But I think probably everybody here just has a little responsibility. Everyone that's here with us tonight. I mean, you've just spent an hour and a half with us on a Saturday night. So, hey, you're on the journey already anyway. Thank you. But I think just go and commit to talking to 5 people this week about it. Have that conversation. Read them the statement. Read the bits of the statement that really mean something to you, and have a conversation about it. Obviously, every single conversation matters, but some of the things that I think you were saying, Paul, that people's objections and ill-informed and ridiculous things that they say about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people is answered in the statement. That we are not innately criminal people. That all those conversations, all those objections are actually answered in the statement, if people are just willing enough to listen. So I think just listen, go and talk to people and help spread the word. I think we've got a responsibility to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having me anyway. I mean, I really appreciate it.
Jacqui, have you got a few words?
I've already had many words, but I just want to, I totally endorse what my fellow panelists have said. And, Mich-Elle, you're absolutely right. I just also want to acknowledge the people that are here tonight, like the Women's Reconciliation Network people and people from the Sydney Alliance. They're we're already walking together, and as you say, Mich-Elle, just go and speak to other people. Just make sure, keep it simple, use the Uluru Statement as an educational tool because it's so straightforward, and let's just get on with it. And I was quite hungry now to go and have dinner, but I'm just keep thinking of boiled frogs. But yeah, I see what you're saying, and I like the metaphor. But yeah, and thank you very much for having me.
I think you said me, didn't you? You're on mute. What I was going to say is I think building those relationships and partnerships, knowing the country that you're on, and like from a land council perspective, we've come across some great organisations and great people out there who are willing to listen and sit down and have a yarn and taking things on board, and they're becoming allies and advocates for us. And I think I think it'll be a lot better when we understand that there's a trauma in community too, and people have trauma and families, and we need to understand that and tread carefully forward and be respectful, dignity when asking questions. But I see we can set an example for the rest of the world if we do things right. I think, and one of the things we are looking at is hopefully is looking in the future in the Geographical Names Board, when we get the 3 tiers of government working together, that we actually include clan names as part of our official maps, which would be great. And wouldn't it? That'd be really wonderful. And I think it can be done. It takes time, about relationships, partnerships, and getting people on board and being logical, but also from the heart too.
Thank you, Michael. And look, and just regarding that, regarding renaming and the Geographic Names Board, if you're not aware of how and why Walu became Walu, Mount Panorama in Bathurst, you know, certainly having a look at that whole campaign, because it's those successful campaigns that will also guide any future ones. You know, sort of we're having issues with having places co-named Aboriginal names, let alone clan names. So right now there is, I think submissions are over, but it's certainly probably pertinent to have a look at a proposal that has gone forward to rename the Womble is for the river. The river heading through Bathurst and beyond. So that's also led by the Bathurst Local Aboriginal Land Council. So you know, all of these things, different people doing different things, absolutely is very important to hopefully Uluru actually becoming a document that we can all have all of our lives and our institutions guided by on this continent. Well, look,
I was going to say one other quick thing.
Yeah.
The whole issue about climate change and things like that, when you think about it, talking to Aboriginal people about how country should be cared for, and about, you know, caring for country, about the using of fire, not as being dangerous, but as part of caring for it. We need to really look at that, and obviously looking at the rivers, because the rivers are like the veins and the arteries of a country.
Mm. Absolutely. So feel free to go back and have a look at the video from our third panel today, which is about that. And we did focus on the rivers, and we unfortunately weren't able to get into fire stick management because Victor Stephenson, who was going to be with us, wasn't able to be. But if anyone is interested in that, I'm sure you guys are already well aware, but anyone who's not, Fire Sticks Alliance. So the Fire Sticks Alliance is the website to have a look at where we're going with using fire as a cultural management tool. So look, I'll love to finish up tonight, if I may, to celebrate this yarning so everyone can get up and have some dinner by switching on your video if it's not on. And what we'd like you to do is we'd just like to say Uluru together. So if everyone switches on their video, you can go into gallery view. So if you actually go into your view on the right side of your picture and just go into gallery view, then you're going to see everybody and we can all see each other now. Isn't that lovely? Yeah. Yeah, isn't that lovely? So the organisers want us all to say Uluru and wave. So if we can do that, we'll go 3, 2, 1. Uluru!
Uluru! Thank you, Mich-Elle and team.
Voice treaty truth.
Voice treaty truth.
Voice treaty truth.
Voice treaty truth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful day.
Yeah. Thank you. It has been a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Wonderful job.